I'm going to make a big, bold claim right now that is going to be unpopular, controversial, and is likely going to get completely misconstrued. If you're a landlord in the province of British Columbia, you want to try and get out of that as quickly as you possibly can. Are you someone who's thinking of buying a rental property in British Columbia? Well, you better think again. In this video, we're going to dive into the harsh realities about being a landlord in the province of British Columbia and why it might not be quite as a lucrative investment as you might have originally thought. Give me, someone who has been selling real estate since 2007, has helped hundreds of buyers and hundreds of sellers, and came across hundreds of tenants in Tenancies, the next 10 minutes of your time to fill you in on a few points that are going to save you big in the future. Some stuff that you've probably never considered that you absolutely want to know if you've got any level of interest of being a landlord or are currently one in the province. Plus, you're going to want to hang around to the end of this video as well, because if you are someone who is considering buying a home in the province of British Columbia, I'm going to let you know how you can get your hands on a gift worth up to $350 in value for absolutely free. So if that sounds good, let's get into it. Hey, it's Darren here. If you're thinking of moving to Surrey, White Rock, or any of the surrounding suburbs, subscribe below so you can be the first to learn about the market and the areas. And like so many others, we've helped in the process of buying or selling a home. If you need help in the process, whether it's today or 6 months from now, use the link in the description to book a time to speak with me. We'll help you make sure that your move is the absolute best that it could ever be. So why shouldn't you become a landlord? Or if you are a landlord in British Columbia, why should you get out of being a landlord as fast as you can? You see, landlords in British Columbia face incredibly stringent rules and have very minimal rights when it comes to comparing them to their counterpart, someone renting a property called a tenant. This prevailing sentiment sometimes paints landlords as greedy profiteers, assumed to be wealthy individuals exploiting renters for personal gain. However, many landlords are just regular people who rely on their rental income to help pay their mortgage, cover maintenance costs, and other expenses of owning an investment property. It's important to recognize that tenants also face challenges in the rental market. And if you're a tenant watching this video, the goal of this is not to upset you and not to trigger you. I am not here to vilify renters or people renting properties. The focus of this video is to shed some light on the challenges that landlords have under the current regulatory environment in British Columbia. Government policies are heavily geared towards tenant protection, which can sometimes lead to landlords feeling unfairly supported and unfairly treated. If you're considering investing in rental properties in BC, you need to hear these 3 points I'm about to share with you. Understanding both the challenges and the biases that you're going to face being a landlord in BC is absolutely critical to your success. And again, if you're a tenant, please don't misconstrue the message of today's video. I completely acknowledge that the rental market can be incredibly difficult for a tenant, with really high rates of rent and very limited availability of properties. Tenants play a crucial role in creating a vibrant, diverse community, one that we can all thrive and prosper in, and their contributions to those communities are invaluable. But again, this video aims to highlight the specific struggles that landlords face in BC's regulatory environment. So let's move on and talk about the 3 reasons why I think you should completely forget about being a landlord in BC. Number 1, you can't raise the rent. Well, that's not completely true, but it kind of is true as well. What do I mean by that? Back in 2018, a landlord could raise a tenant's rent based on the consumer price index increase for that year plus 2%. But that was also changed in 2018 to only being able to increase the rent by the consumer price index each year. Well, the provincial government, they didn't exactly follow their own rules. In 2024, the rent increase limit was 3.5%. In fact, the province even boasted about the annual rental increase cap being well below inflation, going on to say the rent cap of 3.5% is well below the 12-month average inflation rate of 5.6% and applies to rent increases with an effective date on or after January 1st, 2024. Well, hold on a sec. That doesn't really quite seem fair, but here's a little more unfairness that has been dished out by the provincial government. The historical rent increases over the last 5 years equal up to about 9.6%. In fact, in 2021, the allowable rental increase was actually 0, but that was during the time of COVID and nobody knew what was going on. In 2022, when inflation was absolutely soaring off the charts, the only allowable rental increase at that time by the province was 1.5%. To put this in perspective a little bit further, the CPI increase in the last 5 years, according to Stats Canada, was 19% and came in at 16.7% in British Columbia. To make matters worse, in January 2019, pre-COVID, mortgage rates for a variable rate mortgage were at about 2.36%. Fast forward to January 1st of 2024, interest rates were at 5.95%, according to Rate Hub. This means your expenses as a landlord, if you had a variable rate mortgage, are up almost 3.5% in 5 years. And let's not misunderstand what 3.5% on a mortgage means. 3.5% is a ton of money that is increased if you're on a variable rate mortgage. To add to all that, in the last 5 years, inflation was up about 19.35%. So you've had the consumer price index go up, you've had mortgage rates go up, and similar to the consumer price index, you've had inflation go up at rates significantly faster than what you've been able to legally raise the rent of your rental unit by in British Columbia. Sounds like a little bit of a losing battle, doesn't it? Well, and if you're paying attention at home, you can imagine, well, whose costs do go up when all that other stuff is changing in the economy? The landlords. Guess whose costs didn't go up to meet the same level of increases that the landlords did? The tenant. So this first point just means that being a landlord over the last 5 years has been increasingly getting less profitable as the years have gone on. But you're a smart landlord. You're probably thinking, I could easily just remove the tenant and sell my rental property. This isn't that big of a deal. If it's not making money, I just won't be a landlord anymore because, you know, the numbers stop making sense after a while. Well, here's the problem. You can't just remove the tenants. Into point number 2. Years ago, a concept called a fixed term tenancy existed, where you would place a tenant into a rental property for a fixed period of time, call it 1 year, and after that term was out or over, you would renegotiate a new contract with that tenant based on whatever the market was doing at that time. If rentals went up and they became more expensive, you would match what the market going rate was for your rent. And if they went down, to be able to fill the unit, you'd have to do the same thing. You'd have to match whatever the rents were doing at the time. Should you not come to an agreement with that tenant, you would both part ways. The tenant would move out of the rental unit, giving you the option to re-rent the unit out to new people, or you could occupy it, sell it, whatever you chose to do. But there was a rule change in December of 2017. This rule change made it so fixed-term tenancy agreements could no longer include a clause requiring the tenant to vacate the unit or the dwelling at the end of the term, unless the landlord had a valid reason under the Residential Tenancy Act. Instead, most fixed-term tenancies automatically converted to a month-to-month tenancy at the end of the fixed-term period. So fixed terms aren't really quite a thing anymore. They kind of are, but they're kind of not, because they automatically roll into a month-to-month tenancy. They don't just end anymore. So naturally, you can still remove a tenant for what's called with cause. Let's say they are damaging the unit, or not paying their rent, or they're regularly late in paying their rent. Maybe they're not following the terms of the agreement. Maybe they're smoking in the dwelling, or they're maybe throwing parties all the time and not adhering to whatever terms you agreed to in your tenancy agreement. Well, you can still remove a tenant with cause. You can also have a tenant vacate a rental unit for significant renovation, but it's got to be so significant that the province actually has to agree with your interpretation of that, to the point where you actually have to fill out paperwork with the residential tenancy branch to even see if that's allowable. This means effectively there's only really 2 ways to vacate a tenant unless you're planning on doing a super huge renovation, and that is for what's called owner occupancy. You or a close family member is going to be moving into the rental dwelling to occupy it, or you've sold the unit to somebody who is intending to occupy it for either themselves or their close family members. Those are really the only 2 options that are viable to remove a tenant from your dwelling. Okay, so far we know that we can't raise the rent, and we now know that fixed term tenancies don't really remove a tenant from the property. So unless initiated by the tenant, you would have to sell that property to somebody to move into it. Okay, well, no big deal, right? You're not going to leave it vacant if a tenant chooses to move out, so you can just easily sell it to somebody who can either assume the tenancy or move themselves or their family into the dwelling. Well, hold on there, because in comes the straw that broke the camel's back with the most recent announcement that just was made effective on July 18th of 2024. So what was this big announcement that just came in? Well, it was actually actually a little bit quieter than you would suspect for how impactful it's really going to be on the rental market and the resale market for anyone trying to sell a property that has a tenant in it. This little tweak of a change was simply changing the amount of notice you have to give to a tenant to vacate the dwelling from a full 2 months worth of notice to a full 4 months of notice. Let me explain why that's so significant. Put yourself into the shoes of a would-be home buyer for a moment, looking at two identical units in, let's say, a condominium building. One is owner-occupied, the owners are selling it to go upgrade into something else, and the other one is tenant occupied. But other than that, they're identical in every single way. This means when choosing between the two units, if you, for whatever reason, prefer the tenanted unit and you wrote an offer to purchase that on August the 2nd and had all of your conditions removed before the end of the month and gave the appropriate notice to occupy that property, the buyer writing the offer on August the 2nd would not be able to take occupancy of that dwelling until January 1st of 2025. Wait, what? Why so long, you ask? Because of the requirement to give a full 4 months notice to the tenant so they can find new rental accommodations. So you're probably at home shaking your head right now being like, well, why would anybody do that? Why would they just not buy the owner occupied property and move in whenever they can agree to with the people that are selling it? That's exactly the problem. Home buyers are going to gravitate to buying owner-occupied homes because they're not going to be prepared to wait 4+ months to take on a purchase. Don't believe me? Well, here's another reason why. If you've ever purchased a property and you needed a mortgage, which is the majority of people that buy homes, as you would imagine, when you go to any of the major lending institutions to get a mortgage, they typically are going to offer you what's called a rate hold for about 90 days. So when you write an offer on a property, they will hold the rate that they guaranteed you for up to 90 days. And some banks will do this for up to 120 days. And what this really does is this allows you to take advantage and kind of have a guarantee of what your mortgage rate is when it comes time to close on that property. Well, if you're doing the math at home, you're starting to see the problem with this 4+ months worth of notice. This means, back to our example of the buyer who writes an offer on August the 2nd, let's pretend as an example that they had a rate hold done as late as August the 1st. We're talking they wrote an offer the day after they got a rate hold. So like absolute best case scenario. Well, that 120-day rate hold, that's going to expire on November the 30th. This means that buyer doesn't even know what type of mortgage they might be able to get when it comes time to complete on the property in January of 2025. What home buyer in their right mind is going to write an offer on a property that far down the road and not even know what the terms of their mortgage are going to be because it's so far away? This means that tenanted properties are going to be very, very difficult to sell, and many landlords are going to have to sell them at a significant discount to even get rid of them. Buyers simply are going to avoid these properties from buying them, and of course, they're not going to take on these tenancies either. There's many issues with them doing that. So incredibly tough to sell, and if you do sell, you're likely going to have to sell at a significant discount to other properties that are out there that are owner occupied. Doesn't sound like a great investment at this point, does it? The funny thing is, the government introduced all of this to really support renters and tenants and make sure that they have more time to go find rental accommodations. But this is where it's going to backfire. If buyers are avoiding these properties and the tenant is effectively the only one that can initiate moving out of the property at this point, do you think those landlords, once that tenant puts their hand up and says, I want to move out, do you think they're putting that property back into the rental pool, or do you think they will let it become vacant and sell it off so they can do it easier and actually sell it for a true market value? So you can't raise the rents, you can't remove the tenants, and you're going to have an incredibly difficult time selling to a buyer. And if you can, you're likely going to be selling at a discount. As I stated at the start of this video, our rental market needs landlords and our rental market needs tenants. However, the scales need to tip fairly in benefit of both parties, and right now they are absolutely not. Here's the bigger problem. When you're a landlord, profits, well, they matter. Landlords are not charity cases. They are not here providing accommodations for tenants out of the goodness of their hearts. If there is no profit and there's no silver lining at the end of the rainbow for that landlord, they simply will invest their money in other areas. So here's where I'm left with a question for you. But before I get to that question, I want to let you know about our BC Home Buyers course. Over 3 hours of video content, PDF downloads, and questionnaires to help anybody buying a home in the province of British Columbia do it right the first time, save money, avoid all the pitfalls that can catch a buyer off guard, and more. For a very limited time, we are giving away this course, which is a $350 value for absolutely free. Yeah, free. And we're giving away free access to the first 20 people who register by using the link below in the description of this video. So go ahead and get yours before they're all run out. So my question for you watching this video, and even if you're a tenant watching this video, I want you to have an open mind about some of these changes. I want to know what you think this will do to the rental market. I want you to consider whether they are fair. Are the scales equally balanced for both landlords and tenants? And the thing I'm most curious about is, what do you think is going to happen to the private rental market in British Columbia with all of these new changes that have arisen over the last few years? If you want to learn more about this new 4-month notice period that just came out and how it's going to be detrimental to the real estate market if you are a landlord, you're going to want to check out the video coming up next. It looks just like this, where we go over the whole thing in detail so you can make better decisions about the real estate endeavors you choose to participate in. Hey, look, I want to thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more videos on anything to do with White Rock, BC, Surrey, BC, or anything just like this going on with the crazy world of British Columbia real estate. And we'll definitely look forward to seeing you next time. Cheers.